Hi, I'm Morgan Doremus with RT Book Reviews, and today I'm with Carrie Vaughn, and you're in town for BEA, big convention, lots of lines waiting for people to get signatures on your books.
Yes.
Yeah, do you travel a lot for your writing?
I do, and not really planning ahead. I love going to conventions, so every time I get an invitation, or most times when I get an invitation, you know, if I have that weekend open or the publisher wants me to go, it's like, yeah, sure, I'll go. I love doing it. I'll be going to ALA, the American Library Association meeting next month, and then San Diego Comic-Con and the World Science Fiction Convention all this summer.
I like that you mentioned Comic-Con because your books really lend themselves to that kind of readership because of course there's a few names in romance when you say their first name you immediately know who they are. You know, you say Acheron, Sherilyn Kenyon, we absolutely know who that is. You say Suki from Charlene Harris, we absolutely know who that is. Kitty is another one of those characters. All you have to do is say her first name and we immediately know exactly what you're talking about because as a character, she is so strong and so awesome. And you're on book 9 now,
Yes.
Kitty's Big Trouble. And really we've been able as readers to follow her and to really get to know her as a character.
That's really gratifying to hear because that's what I tried to do. You know, the first book I looked at it as a coming of age story. You know, here's somebody learning to take care of herself, and it's been great because with sort of each successive book, it's like, okay, now she's learning to take care of her family and her pack and other people, and it's just been getting bigger and bigger. And I've tried to stay true to the character and you know, imagine, well, what would this actually be like? What would it be like to go through something like that myself? So I never would have imagined, you know, 5 years ago that I'd be working on book 9 and book 10 will be out next year and I'm starting work on book 11. So
Wow.
it's gotten bigger than me, you know, bigger than I imagined. So.
And to say these are paranormals is probably an understatement because they have just about every creature
They do.
you can imagine. I mean, from werewolves to, I mean, just every creature, like every. Is there any you know, supernatural element that you've maybe wanted to put in that you haven't yet between all of the different characters and creatures?
Yeah, the problem is there's too much to fit in. You know, I decided really early on, it's like, okay, if you're starting with the idea that vampires and werewolves are real, then I can't draw a line. Then it means...
Then fairies suddenly appear,
fairies,
and then ghosts appear.
That's pretty much exactly it. It's like, well, wait a minute. You know, I can have TV psychics who are actually real. I can deal with historical stories with supernatural elements and make those elements real. Yeah, of course, ghosts must be real. You know, I got to a point where I couldn't draw a line. You know, I just wanted to include everything because if one's real, who am I to say that vampires are real and jinn are not, or that werewolves are real and were-tigers are not? You know, that's not for me to say. So I'm just putting it all in there. And yeah, at the point, I sort of have to pick and choose just because otherwise it would be a total mess. You know, it would be totally chaotic.
Well, in Kitty's Big Trouble, there's two main kind of plot thrusts that we're going to see. The first one is, of course, she kind of stumbles onto the idea of how long have supernaturals been around and what place have they had? So she starts looking at historical figures being used as, you know, generals in wars and how much they had to play in that. And then on the other hand, she also has a whole adventure where you of course got the vampires, the evil vampires coming after, and she's now having to deal with, okay, I've got to go make sure that they're not going to, you know, be taking over the world anytime soon. So you've got these two major plot things happening in a single book. Can you tell me how you interweave the two and how, while reading, what readers are going to find?
I think the idea in my own mind, and I think I'll have to leave it to somebody else whether or not it actually makes it into the book, was that Kitty's sphere of influence is kind of expanding to not just the historical, but to the global. And she is having to worry about it. It is kind of her responsibility just because she's taken it on to track down, you know, various people, various things, make sure, you know, the big bad doesn't get out of hand. And I think in her own mind and in my mind, you know, you can expand that through time as well, that she is looking into the past and going, well, wait a minute, if this is happening now, what happened back then? And there's actually a thread of an old story that I worked on when I was just getting started. You know, it never went anywhere. I was never able to sell it or do anything with it. But the idea of, I'm not going to give it away, well, it's in the first chapter, so maybe I can give it away.
Maybe a little bit of it away.
That a famous Civil War general was possibly a werewolf, and she kind of gets a hold of this idea and tries to track it down. And what does she have to do to track it down? And what implications are that? You know, and that leads her to another historical figure that she actually does track down and discover something about him. And you know, it's one of those things I would love to be able to play with a whole lot more. And you know, I'm trying to think now what books are out and which ones I'm working on. But there's more of that further on as well. You know, in book 10, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Book 10, which comes out next year, Kitty steals the show. She goes to London and meets a vampire who's been around for a very long time and is also a historical figure. So.
Oh, I love it. Well, speaking of jumping around in time a little, in historical figures, you have a book coming out after this one, Big Trouble, which is Kitty's Greatest Hits.
Yes.
And this is something very different from your other novels, because this isn't necessarily a novel per se. These are short stories that are all come together that really show different time periods. We have a Babylonian, I believe, all the way through like today.
The Tudor England and you know, colonial Spain, yeah. They're all short stories that involve Kitty and her world in some form or another.
So we're going to see characters that maybe are only secondary characters, but they get a story themselves.
There's a couple of origin stories, you know, of secondary characters from the series, and a lot of them, you know, most of them did appear in other publications, but a lot of them I wrote not necessarily for publication, but because I needed to get straight in my own head where some of these characters came from and what the backstories actually were. And especially there's a story in there called Looking After Family, which is about Cormac and Ben as teenagers and how they developed a friendship. And I wrote it because I wanted to know. You know, I'd gotten to the point in the series where it's like, okay, these two have history together.
What
you know,
is that history?
What is it? Yeah, I had to figure that out, and I wanted to get it down on paper so that I would know and I could refer back to it. And I have. I've referred back to that story. And, you know, I've been writing short stories for 12 years now, 10 or 12 years, and you know, so the Looking After Family one came out in Realms of Fantasy in 2003. So I get emails from people who know the story exists, but they don't know where to find it because, you know, it's a magazine that came out a long time ago, and it's hard to find those back issues. So I've been wanting to do this for a while, just get all of these stories that reveal things about the characters and about the world and put them in one place so I could point people to it and say, here, you know, get this, it will explain a lot, it expands the universe. You learn about Rick, you learn about TJ, you learn about all these secondary characters, and there's a couple of Kitty stories in there as well.
Well, I think another thing that Greatest Hits is going to do is it's going to be for people who might not have started the series yet. They can get a taste for that voice, kind of your snarky, humorous, yet sometimes we get into that action, and I really think that they're going to be able to like look at that and be really intrigued, like, oh, I need to go more. You know, I need to learn more. I need more of these characters. And I really think so. I love, you know, after 9 books, you still keep it fresh. There's still stuff to learn about the characters. And I think more than anything else, that's what keeps me coming back, is knowing that there's so much more out there, because it is this crazy paranormal world, and you never quite know what's going to jump out next at you.
And just for my own benefit, I want to do something different with each book and keep things fresh for me, because I think readers can tell when an author is tired with the series or is maybe wandering, and I don't ever want that to happen. I want every book to have something new, to have a new challenge for the character, because that keeps her fresh and growing and interesting.
Well, speaking of different, another project that's already out, it's one that I really connected with. You wrote a book after the Golden Age, and it is a superhero book. There's definite superheroes in it, but it's after the Golden Age. So it's the superheroes are revealed and everyone knows about them, and they've, you know, had their time at kind of saving the world, and maybe they're kind of a little bit, I don't know, it's after their time, you know, and they're still there, yet they're not those, you know, figures that are like stalked by the paparazzi. They're just kind of more the quiet superheroes. And your main character in that is the daughter of probably 2 of the strongest superheroes, and she has no powers whatsoever.
No powers.
And the funny thing was, I start reading the book, and I'm on chapter 3, and I can't look away, and my husband comes in and is like, what is that you're reading? And I tell him, the main plot premise, she has no superpowers. And he told me, well, by the end of it, she definitely will, because that's what authors do. And I'm like, what you did with the story was so inventive. And I'm not going to give away what happens. Let me just say, nobody could predict where you were taking that.
Excellent.
And I just want anybody out there that hasn't picked this up yet. It's not a kiddie book, but it definitely still has your voice and that very fun, very different things happening. And I have to say, how exactly did that come out? Because when you think superheroes, you think the main, I'm going out and I'm saving the world, and a lot of the drama in the book actually takes place in a courtroom. Like,
yes, yeah, it's superhero courtroom drama.
About?
Well, and you should point out that the main character is an accountant, which is the other bit
forensic accountant of all things, right?
And there are so many threads that went into this because my mother's an accountant, and I worked in an accounting office for many years, just as the office manager. And my mother actually once had a bookkeeping job that she was on for a few weeks when she discovered that the previous bookkeeper had been embezzling. And this was my first exposure to forensic accounting, and it's a really interesting field. It's how the Enron guys got caught. It's how Arthur Anderson got in trouble. It's all of these corporate guys.
Somebody going to jail for tax evasion or for money laundering or for embezzling, it's the forensic accountant that catches them and says, this is what happened.
So this is actually, I think, a really ripe area for mystery and thriller novels, just because these are the guys that find, they catch bad guys. It's really cool. And so making her an accountant, I did that very specifically because I wanted to be a little subversive there. But she's also a character, on the outside looking in, kind of, or has a foot in both worlds. So she's able to comment on it in a way that other characters can't. And it was just a really interesting perspective to write from. So it's.
I love how you used the tropes of superheroes without being either dismissive of like, oh, these are for young boys or whatever, but at the same time, you dug a lot deeper into it because a lot of the issues that are dealt with in the book have to deal with I'm not good enough or there's something lacking in me. And it's really funny because you can look at her and it's kind of an obvious thing of like, yeah, you're not a you can't freeze people, you can't fly. So I can see where you're not feeling good enough. But on the other hand, it's also everyone feels not good enough sometimes.
Yeah,
we don't have to have a superhero parent to not feel good about ourselves.
Yeah, and a lot of the commentary I've seen on the book and the reviews have stated it's more family drama.
It is.
As much as it is a superhero novel, or even more than it is a superhero novel, because it's about her relationship with her parents and trying to carve her own path in the world. And it's gratifying to hear you comment on The Voice, because I do see similarities between After the Golden Age and the Kitty novels, because I do try to write about women who stand up for themselves and learn to take care of themselves and overcome some of those issues that we all have, and that's what I like to write about, and that's something I think all of my books have in common, even though they're not kitty books. So.
Absolutely. Well, so we've got the After the Golden Age, which is out now. You can go and get it, and then we've got Kitty's Big Trouble. Yes. And then right after that, we've got Kitty's Greatest Hits. So there's so many books from you coming out. Like, go to your bookstore, pre-order on Amazon, check it out, and we just want more. So it's so good to hear that there's going to be. We've already heard about book 10, and hopefully many, many more.
I'm planning on it.